Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's dive into the top stories. Russia launches a new barrage of 597 drones and 26 missiles overnight, killing at least 2 people in Chernivtsi near the Romanian border. President Zelensky said half of the attack drones were Iranian-made and urges Western allies to impose stronger sanctions to stop Moscow's escalating strikes. Indirect talks in Qatar between Hamas and Israel for a Gaza ceasefire are reportedly stuck over Israel's plans to keep troops in the territory, 2 Palestinian sources have told the AFP news agency. Hamas and Israel have both said that if a 60-day truce is agreed, 10 hostages will be released as part of the deal. Turkish President Erdogan declared victory on Saturday after Kurdish rebels laid down their arms, ending a decades-long armed struggle against Ankara. Everyone in Turkey has won, Erdogan said, insisting the move was for the country's future and promising stability. More than 20 civilians were killed in an airstrike on a monastery in central Myanmar, according to witnesses and anti-junta fighters. Local sources say the military targeted the area to flush out resistance groups, marking one of the deadliest attacks on religious sites since the coup. US President Trump praised Texas Governor Abbott and Homeland Security Secretary Noem for an incredible job responding to flash floods that killed at least 120 people, including many children. Touring Kerr County, the epicenter, Trump said both state and federal teams had worked well together to handle the deadly disaster. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio downplayed talk of tensions with Japan, saying there's no drama or division despite Tokyo's move to reduce reliance on the US. He also rejected reports that Washington is pressuring Japan to boost defense spending, calling it an encouragement rather than a demand. The US State Department says it's aware of reports that a Palestinian-American, Saif al-Din Musallat, was fatally beaten to death by Israeli settlers north of Ramallah. Palestinian media say 10 others were injured in the attack. Israeli authorities say they are investigating. Russia's Sergei Lavrov praised North Korea for its important contribution to liberating Russian territories. Speaking in Wonsan, he thanked North Korea's leadership and troops for their excellent combat training, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. Now we start in Europe, where Russia continued its aerial attacks on Ukraine last night, striking communities far from the front line with drones and missiles. In Chernivtsi, the head of the region's military administration said there was 2 people killed as a result of the strikes. A total of 14 people were also injured in the region, including 4 people who remain in serious condition. In Lviv, officials say 4 people were injured following attacks in the city, which sits around 45 miles from the Polish border. Poland's Air Force said on X that the country scrambled fighter jets to protect its airspace amid the attack. Duty fighter pairs have been scrambled and ground-based air defense and radar reconnaissance systems have reached the highest state of readiness, it said on the social media. Russia hits Ukraine with second largest overnight attack of the war. Meanwhile, in a recent post on X, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned Russia's ongoing aerial strikes, which targeted multiple regions across Ukraine, including Kharkiv, Sumy, Lviv and Bukovina. According to Zelensky, 26 cruise missiles and 597 attack drones were launched, with more than half of them being Shahids. Over 20 missiles and most of the drones were repeatedly destroyed, according to reports by Ukrainian forces. This by far is the second largest strikes made. However, the attacks did hit civilian infrastructure, with residential buildings affected. Tragically, 2 people were killed in Chernivtsi and around 20 others were injured, though they are receiving medical assistance. Zelensky expressed condolences to the victims' families, with a total of 14 people injured in the region, including 4 people who remain in serious condition. The Ukrainian president called for immediate action, urging for stronger sanctions, particularly against those aiding Russia in drone production and oil profiteering. We're now joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent, to give us further details on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Joshua, what more information do you have for us?
Well, yes, Thomas, another series of strikes, over 600 drones and missiles used in what Ukraine is saying is the second largest strike of this war that is into its 4th year. This is a pattern over the last week that we have seen repeating. The record number of strikes, both drones and missiles, was within the last 2 to 3 days. There have been night after night of these style of strikes, and Ukraine's president as well as foreign minister are clearly voicing concern over that. We've heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, as you've mentioned, his tweet detailing the information. We've also heard from Ukraine's foreign minister, Andriy Sybiha, who has said that support is needed to stop the Russian death factory. So far, only a couple of deaths reported, but given the amount of strikes and given the time it sometimes takes for this information to come through, we could be seeing higher casualty numbers, both death and potential injuries. But this is significant. Again, a further example of Russian strikes on Ukraine. Russia say that they only target military infrastructure, but we're seeing more and more, specifically in this last week, reports from Ukraine of civilian targets and civilian casualties. The wider European safety is a point of concern. Poland once again scrambled jets due to the nature of these strikes and the fact that some of them are in the west of Ukraine. Earlier to this week, it was more common to see strikes on the east of Ukraine, where of course Russia are continuing their advance. Kharkiv, Donetsk region, Dnipropetrovsk, these are sort of flashpoints within the conflict, and strikes there, Kharkiv, were very, very common. This is a concern for Ukraine. Kyiv has also been targeted in recent days. So it seems that Russia is stepping up their offensive, and rhetoric I'm sure we'll come to shortly from the wider community is looking really clearly at this.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much. You are staying with us to give us further information. We now move over to South Asia for our next story, where a preliminary crash report into last month's deadly Air India Boeing 787 disaster has revealed that both engines were unintentionally shut down seconds after takeoff. The Dreamliner, flying from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick on June the 12th, crashed shortly after liftoff, killing all 275 people aboard, apart from one survivor, making it the world's deadliest air crash in over a decade. Investigators say both engines' fuel cut-off switches were found in the off position immediately after the aircraft reached takeoff speed, causing a sudden loss of thrust. The cockpit voice recorder captured apparent confusion between the pilots, with one reportedly asking, "Why did you cut off?" and the other responding, "I did not do so." A ram air turbine deployed to supply emergency power, and the crew tried to restart the engines. Only one showed signs of partial recovery. Let's listen in to what the relatives of the victims had to say after the report came out today.
तो ये कि कहते हैं कि इसकी जो भी जांच हो निष्पक्ष हो और जो भी इसके अंदर दोषी पाया जाए उसको सज़ा मिलनी चाहिए, बस हम और कुछ नहीं चाहते। हमारा का जो खोना था वो तो हमने तो खो लिया, पर हमारा तो एक ही है कि ऐसी लापरवाही हो कि और किसी की जान ना जाए, हमारा एक ही कहना है और कुछ।
इसके अंदर प्रिकॉशंस लेने हो वो सारे गवर्नमेंट ले, ताकि ऐसा हादसा फिर कभी भी कहीं भी किसी के भी साथ ना हो और कोई भी।
Now the fallout continues from the preliminary crash report into the air disaster that altogether killed 275 people. The US Federal Aviation Administration confirmed it has received the report and says it remains engaged with international partners, while the National Transportation Safety Board continues to lead the American side of the investigation. Boeing has deferred all comment to the Indian Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, citing ICAO protocol. Air India, meanwhile, said it acknowledges the report and is fully cooperating with authorities. But sharp criticism has come from the Pilots Association of India, which raised concerns over the lack of transparency and claimed the investigation appears biased against the cockpit crew. The group also questioned how sensitive details reached the media before official disclosures and called for observer access in the probe. Now we're joined by Captain S.S. Painsar, who's an aviation expert and also was the ex-director of flight safety for Indian Airlines. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Captain Painsar, for joining us on the programme. I want to quickly, before we move on to some of these reactions that have come post-report this morning, what has been your initial response? What are your initial thoughts on this report?
Well, we have just come to know they have sent a 15-page report to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. But I still wonder, who are the experts involved in the investigation of this crash inquiry? Are they experienced pilots, engineers? The Director General of Civil Aviation has a department known as Flight Inspection Directorate. There are pilots. Why don't they involve the pilot from 787 or engineer from 787 to involve them? Then second thing, they have one of the cockpit voice recorder. Why don't they make the cockpit voice recorder read out publicly? Let the public know what is the talk in the cockpit. Why don't they have a public investigation or the judicial inquiry where the facts will be clear? Everything is done under secrecy. The report has been sent to DGCA. One of my friends has commented it is like a Manohar Kahaniya they represented. Now the actual report will come out in 6 months. No, why they can't give a report immediately, giving the fact this particular report, it doesn't represent any facts about the crash, why it has happened. No reason given, only they're talking fuel lever. Fuel lever is not like an on-off switch like in the house you have it. They have a fail-safe feature. You can't put them straight away on and off. There are the catches, you have to lift it and then move it. Flap lever and especially the fuel lever, there are the catches, you can't move it straight up and forward. But which pilot said, "Ke ye kya kiya tune?" The question, who's that pilot? Let them come out with the voice. We will recognize the voice, which pilot said like that. But they won't make the CVR as public. This inquiry is all done at closed doors. There's not a single professional person is involved. And let me tell you one thing more. These two engines fitted on this aircraft were overhauled.
Yes, we are joined by Captain Painsar to discuss this report and the reactions to it that have come out. We have learned that the report on the Air India crash in June has found that both fuel switches were in the cut-off position, and a step that turns off the engines moments before this plane crashed in Ahmedabad, killing over 275 people overall. Audio from this cockpit situation detailed the report, suggests confusion between the two pilots. One of the colleagues asked why he turned it off. The other pilot replies saying he did not so. Also, we've had some responses from the authorities and some of these bodies in response to this report. Friends and families of the victims are reacting, but with one cousin of the crew saying that the new information doesn't change how they're grieving. We're once again joined by Captain S.S. Painsar to discuss this. I want to dive into the reactions to this report now. Accountability is on people's minds here. And obviously, we do have limited information. This is a preliminary report and not a final one. However, the Association of India has raised concerns over the lack of transparency here and has claimed that the investigation appears biased against the cockpit crew. What are your thoughts on that, Captain?
Question we wanted in the public inquiry, an open inquiry. The question is not to blame anybody. The question is to find out what happened actually on this aircraft, what are the actions of the pilot, is any fault of anybody. So once we know the exact thing, then you can come on how to improve on certain things. Then you can give measures to adopt so that such thing does not happen in future. We don't know it's a pilot fault, engineering fault, aircraft fault, company's fault, Air India fault. Nobody knows it. It is the investigation should be pure and straightforward, truthful, with the public involvement. The DGC has got expert pilots. Why they have not involved any pilot in the investigation? Is there any pilot or engineer on 787 involved in this investigation? Are they all expert on this aircraft? Are they giving their judgment on their imagination only? The only thing is you have to involve the right person in the investigation to get the truth of the case. Idea is not to blame anybody. Idea is to know the fact. International Civilization Organization motto is all incident accidents should be investigated for not for the punity purpose, but for the fact to know how and what it happened, how and why it happened, and to take measures to stop such occurrence in the future. Do we have the 787 pilot or engineer involved in this investigation who can also give them some assessor to give them opinion about what could have happened, how the levers move? There's a catch in the fuel lever and the flap lever. They are not like a home switch, light on off switches. There's a catch. You just stay very confident and say one of the pilots talk to the cockpit. Who was that pilot? We will recognize the voice. Let them make the CVR as public. We want to know which pilot said kya hua, switch kaise off kar diya. These facts can be carried out only if there's a right investigation, either by public inquiry or a judicial inquiry, which the government has refused to do it.
Captain, I think your answer there highlights the importance of sticking with the facts that we do know. What can we expect and what kind of protocols are going to be taken now? How is this going to be moved forward? And how long do you think it's going to take until we do get those answers, if we ever do get those permanent answers of what happened on that day on June the 12th?
Sir, unless you have people who are flying this type of aircraft, the engineer from Air India can be called for any clarification and what they speak and the position of aircraft, when the engines were overhauled, when were they overhauled, where were they overhauled, when were they fitted, and who monitored the overhauling of the engines in foreign country. Were they overhauled in India or in a foreign country? We don't know. All these facts belong to the investigation, honest investigation of this crash, because this crash has a lot of ramification all over the world. It has scared the public. We want to win the confidence of the public by giving them the exact situation what has happened, and we assure us that in future we have taken measures. It will not happen in future.
Captain,
idea is not to pinpoint the blame on anybody. Idea is to find out what happened. Yes. We have to learn a lesson.
Yes, yes, that is very much true. Thank you, Captain S.S. Painsar. As the captain says, it's very important that you, the viewers, know that this is a preliminary report and we are further awaiting more information in regards to that crash, that tragic incident that resulted in the death of 275 people. We now move over to Europe for our next story, where Russian Foreign Ministry Sergei Lavrov has said that Moscow will assist in the dialogue between Pyongyang and Seoul on issues that are of interest to North Korea. This comes after Lavrov met with his North Korean counterpart Cho Son-hu in Wonsan. Russian Foreign Minister and his North Korean counterpart signed a plan for exchanges between their diplomatic departments for 2026 to 2027. The signing took place as part of the second round of strategic dialogue at the foreign minister level between the two countries. While addressing North Korea's support for Russia in the special military operation in Ukraine, Lavrov said that Russia had no reason to reject North Korean assistance and that any further assistance in Russia's operation in Ukraine will be decided solely by Kim Jong-un. Lavrov also confirmed Moscow and Pyongyang's plans to resume maritime transport links between the two countries. According to Lavrov, this move will help strengthen people-to-people contacts and stimulate interest in Russia's far eastern border regions. He also expressed hope that tourism between the two countries would grow. We're now joined by our guest, Professor Georgi Toleraya, who's an international affairs expert. He joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Toleraya. This, as we've said, is the second meeting between foreign ministers of the two countries. Why are Moscow and Pyongyang so keen to deepen ties at this particular moment?
Well, that's the second round of the dialogue, strategic dialogue. So they have begun rather regular because Pyongyang, DPRK, is the only, in fact, military ally of Russia. So it's quite natural that they have the need to coordinate their strategies, to exchange in detail their positions on various international issues and on the strategies to address the modern challenges. This is one of the many meetings that we have this year, high-level meetings. We'll have another meeting soon in August when the Russian chair of the parliament, parliament speaker, will visit Pyongyang. And then we'll have another important meetings later in the year. And the visit of Kim Jong-un himself is also in the works. It might not take place this year, but anyway, it's planned. So we have quite a high level of exchange.
Yes, Professor Toleraya. How significant is it that Russia wants to help dialogue between North and South Korea? Do you think Moscow is really trusted between both sides?
Well, I think that's an important statement by the minister when he said that we will only address the issues which are of interest to Pyongyang in its dialogue with Seoul, South Korea. And so far, there are none. There are no issues that Pyongyang wants to address with South Korea because it doesn't hold any dialogue and is not inclined to hold any dialogue with South Korea so far. Kim Jong-un have said late 2023 that North Korea is South Korea is a separate country. It's not friendly. It's the enemy country, and they don't want to deal with it. So far.
Yes, I believe we have some network issues there. We hope to get Professor Toleraya back on the program, but we'll give you further updates. Russia has issued a warning to the United States, South Korea and Japan against using their bilateral relationship as a means to target Russia or North Korea. The statement came from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during his visit to Wonsan, a city in North Korea. Lavrov also said that North Korea had already drawn its own security conclusions long before the latest strikes by the United States and Israel on Iran. He stressed that the conclusions were made in good time, and despite the military build-up by Washington, Seoul and Tokyo, no party is currently considering the use of force against North Korea. Lavrov also said that Moscow respects and understands the reasons behind the development of North Korea's nuclear program. Moreover, he acknowledged US President Donald Trump's remarks about potentially resuming talks with North Korea, but added that no further action has been taken. We're now once again joined by Professor Toleraya. Professor, why is Russia warning the US, South Korea, Japan not to use their alliances to target Russia or North Korea? What does this really mean? Is this a threat? We are bringing you the updates from in regards to Moscow's visit to North Korea, Wonsan. We're now joined by Joshua Barnes, who joins us live from the NewsX newsroom. Joshua, what updates can you give us on this?
Well, yes, Thomas, we've seen strengthened Moscow-Pyongyang ties in recent times. Of course, the link to the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a strong one, but this now focusing on regional stability around North Korea, something which, of course, is a flashpoint and is a concern, a potential conflict in the future. North Korea, of course, nuclear armed, as well as being in a position where there is a dictatorship and a very limited amount of information coming out from North Korea. due to restrictions on media and reporting. But the north-south divide is an issue that has continued, of course, a demilitarized zone in the middle. But a new leader in South Korea, Lee Jae-myung, who has spoken positively about ties with North Korea, talking about opening dialogue. There has been friction. There has, of course, been a flashpoint following the Korean War many decades ago. But on the flip side of the positive rhetoric we've heard from new South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, there have recently been air drills, joint air drills carried out by South Korea, Japan and the United States. This is a flashpoint, and there is concern of widening tensions and geopolitical ramifications. The US also very concerned, but Donald Trump's rhetoric on North Korea has often been positive. It will be interesting to see how Russia's ties with North Korea will evolve. I think the situation around tensions between North and South look like they're heading in a more positive direction, but the problem is real in terms of tensions there, and it's something we will, of course, keep an eye on.
Thank you very much, Joshua. We return to you with a related development where after Ukraine reported that Russia fired more than 620 drones and long-range missiles overnight, 4 people have reportedly been killed in the attack. Ukraine is now calling for fresh sanctions on Moscow to halt its record barrages. Kiev and Moscow have stepped up aerial strikes over recent months, and US-led ceasefire talks aimed at pausing the over 3-year war have now stalled. We're once again joined by Joshua Barnes to discuss this development further. Joshua, a significant aerial attack overnight. What are your thoughts on the current status of the battlefield with obvious diplomatic ongoings in the background?
Well, yes, absolutely, Thomas. We spoke earlier, of course, in the programme, and I mentioned that death toll could rise. It's gone from 2 now to 4, and a potential for that to rise further. This in the midst of support from Western allies and also US involvement in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which we've seen over recent months ebb and flow. We've had rhetoric from Donald Trump and his administration, which has been somewhat positive towards Vladimir Putin, and then we've seen a shift back as well. Of course, the US relations with Volodymyr Zelensky itself have been up and down. That blow up in the White House earlier this year when Volodymyr Zelensky was confronted by Donald Trump over the amount of aid that the US has sent to Ukraine. Let's fast forward to this last week, and I think the US rhetoric has shifted. They understand that there is an increasing number of strikes, like this second largest strike that we've seen overnight targeting Western Ukraine and other regions around that area of the country. I think Donald Trump acknowledges that Ukraine are ready to finish this war. Of course, a 30-day ceasefire proposal from the United States was supported by Ukraine and Western European countries. Russia said no. We've also had direct discussions between Russia and Ukraine, but these have not led to anything more than prisoner exchanges. I think Donald Trump is losing patience. I think he, as he admitted at the start of his second term, said he wanted this war to be done in days. It potentially is a failure for him that he hasn't been able to do so. We've also heard from the US administration that they're frustrated with Putin saying one thing and then his actions being different, talking about the possibility of peace, but then continuing a ground and air offensive on the battlefields and, of course, across the rest of Ukraine. Aid is a vital part of this conversation. US Patriot-made missile systems are vital for Ukraine to limit the damage caused by this extreme strike that we've seen overnight and in previous days. Diplomatic talks are ongoing. US support will be vital for Ukraine if this war extends months, maybe years, because the Russian might is clearly vastly above Ukraine. Support from Western Europe as well is key, and it's something we will continue to look at here on NewsX World.
Joshua, thank you very much once again. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where China and ASEAN have agreed to finalize consultations on a code of conduct in the South China Sea by 2026, a significant step towards managing regional maritime disputes. The agreement was reached during high-level talks, signaling both sides' commitment to enhancing cooperation in the region. In addition to the South China Sea discussions, China and ASEAN unveiled a 5-year action plan that includes over 40 areas of collaboration, covering economic, security and public diplomacy exchanges. This plan aims to boost bilateral cooperation and addresses shared challenges. A major milestone in their economic cooperation is the upcoming Free Trade Zone Pact. Both parties have committed to submitting the agreement for approval and signing by October. On security, both sides reported progress on managing differences in the South China Sea, with the third draft of the Code of Conduct being completed. The initiative is expected to maintain maritime stability and reduce tensions in the region. Public diplomacy exchanges have also flourished. The introduction of the Langchan-Mekong visas and the ASEAN visa aims to make travel between China and ASEAN nations more convenient, fostering stronger ties. These initiatives reflect China's priority on ASEAN as a key partner in its neighborhood diplomacy. China plans to continue building a community of shared future, focusing on peace, prosperity, and inclusivity in the region, which is a statement coming from it. We're now joined by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst located in Taipei, Taiwan. Thank you very much for joining us, Ross. Ross, how significant is this 2026 timeline for finalising the South China Sea Code of Conduct? We see tensions rise there frequently, so how significant is this deal?
We've been hearing about the finalization of this Code of Conduct for the South China Sea literally for years and years and years. So it's certainly possible that they'll finally complete it, given how long they've been working on it. But is it really, excuse me, is it really going to change the situation in the South China Sea? It's difficult to say. China's sovereignty claims conflict with several of the ASEAN countries. Both China and the other claimants are constantly making movements to stake their claim. They are occupying islands. They are building up the islands that they occupy. They're dispatching more naval resources to patrol near the islands that they occupy. So it's really hard to be optimistic that the Code of Conduct is really going to change the tension. And there is a lot of tension. Most notably in recent months, it's been between the Philippines and China, but there's tension between Vietnam and China, and again, among the other claimants as well. It's such a complex issue with overlapping claims. It's just hard to be optimistic about this long-promised Code of Conduct.
Ross, do you think this agreement will effectively reduce tensions among these claimant states, or is it more symbolic than enforceable?
Well, it's just a code. I mean, there is no enforceability mechanism, really. It's the kind of thing ASEAN likes to do. They like to work on consensus. They like to reach agreements with China over a range of different issues, whether that's trade or other types of business facilitation issues, cultural exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So one more agreement with China might look nice. It might give some people optimism, but again, it's just so hard to be optimistic given the situation and how it's been unfolding in recent months and years.
Ross Feingold, thank you. You are staying with us. We stay in the region now where Taiwan is ramping up its national defense readiness with explosive simulations and advanced weaponry as part of its largest annual military drill, the Han Kuang exercises, running from July the 9th to the 18th. This year's drills feature US-supplied HIMARS rocket systems, with some units even stationed at basketball courts ahead of live fire testing. The exercises simulate a potential Chinese amphibious assault and include large-scale reservist mobilizations for the first time, with training in tactical maneuvers and weapons handling. Meanwhile, in diplomatic efforts, Taiwan's foreign minister is in Paraguay leading a business and technology delegation. He's visiting several Taiwan-backed initiatives, including a smart tech park, a polytechnic university, and a donated electric buses. Let's take a listen in to what both the Taiwanese and Paraguayan ministers had to say.
特别的是，本次有31位来自台湾的企业代表随团参访，涵盖半导体、资通讯、科技、营造、智慧农业、高机能布料、绿能、家具以及食品加工等多元领域。他们将与巴拉圭企业进行交流，并参访工业园区、伊泰普水坝、农牧展、 与参加招商投资说明会，实地了解八国良好的投资环境与南方共同市场的庞大商机，以寻求策略联盟与合作的机会。
Reconocemos y agradecemos a la República de China Taiwán por su constante apoyo en estos temas que mencionaba, tan sensibles como la salud, la vivienda, la movilidad urbana.
We're once again joined by Ross Feingold, who joins us from the Taiwanese capital of Taipei. Ross, thank you once again. How do this year's, I'm going to see if I can pronounce this correctly, Han Kawang drills differ from previous exercises?
It differs in several ways. One, it's lengthier, so they've increased the number of days up to 10. Usually it was only about 5 days. So the length of the exercise has increased. Another difference is that they've increased the number of reservists who've been recalled to active duty to participate in the exercise. The government has said that 22,000 reservists were recalled. And also the government has made an effort to say that these exercises this year will be less scripted. One of the criticisms in the past was that the exercises were heavily scripted to put on a good show for the media, put on a good show for the politicians, and ultimately put on a good show for the public, and to avoid anything going wrong. Or anything that might bring embarrassment to Taiwan's military. But again, this year they're saying that it's much more unscripted than in the past.
Yes, and Ross, what message does Taiwan hope to send to Beijing also the international community, of course, with these expanded drills, and also the integration of the US-supplied systems like the HIMARS?
Taiwan wants to send a message to China, as well as its international partners, most notably the United States, that Taiwan is ready to defend itself. There's been so much criticism over the years of Taiwan's military, of the people's willingness to fight, of the size of the military budget. Some of the weapon systems that they've procured have also been criticized for various reasons. So Taiwan's military and the elected political leadership, they're constantly fighting against this notion that the Taiwanese don't want to defend themselves. And they want to display to Beijing, as well as to the United States and other close security partners like Japan and Australia, that the Taiwanese people are, in fact, willing to fight to defend their island from a Chinese invasion.
Ross, thank you. You are staying with us. We now move over to North America for our next story, where a major rift has erupted inside the US law enforcement establishment following the release of a memo on the Jeffrey Epstein case, with Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino reportedly considering resignation. Sources say Bongino clashed with Attorney General Pam Bondi during a tense White House meeting over who blocked further disclosures related to Epstein's death. The controversy has triggered backlash from Trump allies, with Bongino and the FBI Director Kash Patel accused of leaking frustrations to the press, something Bongino denies. He's previously promised more transparency and is also under fire over a jail surveillance video that appears to skip a crucial minute, reigniting conspiracy theories. The White House insists the team remains unified, calling reports of division baseless. Now, we're once again joined by Ross Feingold to discuss this further. Ross, more troubles in the White House, this time in the security services. This is an interesting topic, as the Jeffrey Epstein files have been a long and ongoing topic, especially with right-wing conservatives and conspiracy theorists who are known to be staunch Trump allies. What are the problems that the US, the FBI and the Attorney General's office, what are the problems that they are currently facing in regards to this case?
Well, it's a diversion. It's a diversion from more important things that they should be doing. According to the FBI, under the previous administration and now reiterated under the new Trump administration, this is case closed. Epstein committed suicide in jail, and there's no client list. And that's what the Biden administration had said, and they were criticized for that in the MAGA internet talkosphere, there was lots of criticism and conspiracy theories. But when the Trump administration took office, they confirmed what was previously said about Epstein's death, as well as the existence or the lack thereof of a list of clients. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that President Trump does not want high-level resignations in his team. He had a lot of that in his first term. He picked his people very carefully for his second term. Notably, loyalty was one of the major considerations, but also that they would all get along together. And I don't think Trump wants to see anyone at such a senior level go. And I would think that Trump is probably trying to persuade him to stay and for everybody to let bygones be bygones and move on to more important work of the FBI and the Department of Justice. So I don't think President Trump is hoping for a resignation.
But what would you say about what it looks like? What it looks like, reported split between departments around something like the Epstein files, which is a huge conspiracy theory movement, and this is now going to the highest level of government. How do you think this is going to turn out? Do you think this will be swept under the rug when more stories will come out and other things grab headlines? Or how do you think this story might develop?
I think it'll die down eventually. People could keep talking about it on X or Truth Social or on YouTube shows and live streams, but there's nothing there. And I do think, to be fair to the Department of Justice and the FBI, if they had something to release, they would release it. I mean, these are people who did say that they were going to get to the bottom of it. They did discuss for years throughout the time of the Biden administration that there might be more there, such as client lists, or that Epstein may have committed suicide. But now that they've been in office for 5 months, they've had a chance to look through the available evidence, and they've determined that really what was previously said by the Biden administration turned out to be correct. So again, I think we should be fair to them. I think they did make an effort to produce information for their fans on social media, but there just wasn't anything there. And now they would like to move on and hope that the public moves on as well. And I do think the public will move on. In the world of politics, there's always something new. There's always a new scandal. There's always a new policy, et cetera, to talk about.
Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. It was always a pleasure to have you on. We now move over, once again, stay in the US, where an appeals court refused to allow Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the accused mastermind of the September 11th, 2001 attacks, and two of his co-defendants, to plead guilty under agreements that would have spared them the death penalty. Judges in Washington, D.C. rejected the agreement, which would have given Mohammed and the other defendants a life sentence without parole in a 2-1 decision on Friday. Mohammed is accused of organising and directing the 9/11 attacks on the United States, in which hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, killing almost 3,000 people. He was captured in 2003 and is being held in Guantanamo Bay, the camp prison in Cuba. Under the deal, families of the 9/11 victims would have been allowed to pose questions to Mohammed, who would be required to answer them, and fully and truthfully, according to the lawyers. Now we're joined by Joshua Barnes, once again, anchor and correspondent, to discuss this in further detail. Joshua, what can you tell us more about this situation?
Well, yes, Thomas, this is an extremely interesting story that is coming out, and of course something that is almost 25 years old in the obviously 9/11 attacks, nearly 25 years old. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was caught, as you mentioned, in 2023, so this legal process has been going on for well over 20 years now, and there is division, not just amongst the court, who have thrown out this potential plea deal that would have seen Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his two co-conspirators potentially avoiding the death penalty, but it's also dragging on for those who lost loved ones. As you mentioned, around 3,000 people killed during the separate 9/11 attacks at the Pentagon, at the World Trade Centers, and also a plane which crashed after being hijacked. There is division. Some say that they just want this situation over, the pain of reliving that moment again and again to be finished, the ability to pose questions and have a legal conclusion to something which is still rumbling on over 2 decades after capture and over 2 decades after the devastating terrorist attacks and that events on 9/11. But some people say that the death penalty, some victims and obviously these court members looking at it, saying that the death penalty is needed given the extremity of the situation. It's tough, of course, for America, a dark day in American history, arguably the darkest day, but one that is being brought back with this update. It'll be interesting to see what the next steps are and how the legal process can continue and make it that the members of family and the loved ones of those who were killed are somewhat satisfied with any conclusion.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much for your insight. We now move on where at least 4 migrants have died and about 20 others are still missing after their boat capsized off the coast of the Dominican Republic, authorities reported. The boat carrying approximately 40 people was en route to Puerto Rico when it ran into trouble in the Caribbean Sea. 17 survivors were rescued, including 10 Dominicans and 7 Haitians, according to the Dominican Civil Defense Authority. A child was among those saved. The vessel, known as a Yola, is a type of makeshift boat often used for dangerous migrant crossings. Migrants commonly pay as much as $7,000 for a one-way journey to Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory from the Dominican Republic, which shares the island of Hispaniola, with Haiti currently facing a humanitarian crisis. The incident highlights the growing problem of illegal migration from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico, a trend that has increased significantly in the past decade. Now we move on. Australian authorities have confirmed that they have found a 26-year-old German backpacker safe and well after she had been missing in a remote part of the country's northwest for almost 2 weeks. Carolina Wielger, who vanished on June the 29th from near the outback town of Beacon, around 254 kilometres north of Western Australia's state capital Perth, was found by a passing motorist on a road in the region on July the 11th, according to the police. Wielger was airlifted to Perth, where she was transported to the hospital, where she is now recovering. A large-scale search was initiated for Wielger after her vehicle was found abandoned in the state's sparsely populated Wheat Belt region, which spans 154,000 square kilometres. Well, here's what the Australian police had to say.
Today I'm pleased to say that missing backpacker Carolina Wielger was located safe and well yesterday evening after an extensive search. At about 4:15 p.m. yesterday, 11 July 2025, police were advised Carolina had been located after flagging down a passing car within the Wheatbelt area. This is the best result we could have hoped for. There is a lot of effort that goes into a search of this size. The resources deployed and the community support was significant. So to find Carolina safe and well is a fantastic, look, it's sheer luck. The area out there, there's mixed terrain. It can be quite dangerous if you don't know what you're doing or where you are going. It's very easy to get lost.
Now we move over to South America, where Venezuela says it's in daily talks with the Trump administration over the fate of 252 of its citizens detained in El Salvador. The detainees, including 18 children reportedly separated from their families, are accused of links to the Tren de Agua gang, claims the Maduro government strongly denies. Venezuela's chief negotiator and Chavismo campaign chief, Jorge Rodriguez, confirmed the talks as part of efforts to secure the return of what the government calls kidnapped Venezuelans. Rodriguez also addressed the launch of Chavismo's campaign for the upcoming July the 27th mayoral elections, outlining their goal to secure all 335 mayoralties nationwide. Let's listen in to Rodriguez, the chief negotiator.
Entonces, por supuesto, nosotros señalando que no es exacto en todos sus postulados la nota de New York Times, claro que llegado el momento con las pruebas correspondientes vamos a explicar cuáles fueron esos eventos que ocurrieron. Lo que sí te puedo decir es que a diario estamos planteando fórmulas para que nos regresen a nuestros niños y para que nos regresen a nuestros 252 venezolanos secuestrados.
Now, in Bosnia, thousands gathered in Srebrenica to mark 30 years since Europe's worst atrocity since the Holocaust. In 1995, over 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys were killed. The solemn ceremony included the burial of 7 newly identified victims, their remains recovered from mass graves, still being unearthed decades later. Many families, like that of Maritzeta Karik, are burying only fragments of their loved ones, bones found in multiple grave sites. July the 11th, 1995 marks the day Bosnian Serb forces seized the UN-designated safe zone, separating and executing Muslim men and boys before scattering their remains to hide the crime. Despite rulings from international courts, Serbia and Bosnian Serb leaders still deny the genocide. Speaking at the event, survivors and leaders called for the world to confront hate and justice, comparing today's suffering in Ukraine and Palestine to the horrors of Srebrenica.
Poruka koja nam je najvažnija da se pošalje jeste da stoje građani Srbije koji se saosećaju, koji zaista imaju želju da grade mir kroz poverenje i kroz priznanje patnje koju su neki drugi ljudi doživjeli, posebno ljudi koji su zapravo žrtve zločina koji se dogodio u Srebrenici.
Now we move back to South America, where Colombian police have arrested Italian national Giuseppe Palermo, known as Pepe, believed to be the Latin American liaison for the region's mafia, which is deeply involved in international drug trafficking. The arrest took place in Bogota during a coordinated operation involving Colombian, Italian and British authorities, as well as Europol. Let's listen in to what the Deputy FBI officer Dan Borghino said.
La Policía Nacional de los Colombianos, a través de la Dirección de Inteligencia y la Cooperación Internacional con Europol, el Reino Unido, ubicó y capturó a un delincuente de nacionalidad italiana en el norte de la ciudad de Bogotá. Un delincuente requerido por los delitos de narcotráfico y solicitado en extradición.
Palermo, who is wanted under an Interpol red notice, has been linked to overseeing cocaine shipments from Colombia to Europe. Italian authorities have requested his extradition, identifying him as a key figure in the mafia. The group maintains close ties with Colombia's Clan del Golfo, one of the country's main cocaine-producing cartels. FBI officer Dan Borghino further said,
Extradición. Se aplica la circular roja de Interpol a este delincuente que forma parte de una organización transnacional de narcotráfico, de la mafia italiana denominada 'Ndrangheta, una persona buscada por 196 países.
According to Colombian Police Chief Carlos Fernandino Trianda, Palermo was responsible for managing illegal trafficking routes, both maritime and land, to move large quantities of cocaine from South America to European markets. The arrest comes amid growing concerns over illegal cocaine production, which surged by nearly 34% in 2023, reaching over 700 tons, driven largely by the expansion of cocoa cultivation in Colombia. Reports say authorities are now working to extradite Palermo to Italy, where he faces multiple charges related to drug trafficking. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.